So, Ben Jun, I'm so thankful that you are here with me. Ben and I are very old friends, and I was thinking today about what a gift it is to have friends for more than 30 years. So we met each other probably in 1994, and we were in the same study at the same university, and we've kept in touch and see each other every few years. And Ben, he's kind of in the middle between a couple of things. So this is a big, great opportunity that he said, hey, I'm kind of taking a little break between things. I have a little bit of time. I could come to Croatia, and I said, please, please do. So thank you, Ben, so much for joining us here.
Thanks, Nolan. So I actually shared a lab bench with Nolan, and we built analog circuits together and stayed a lot later, I think, than other people in the lab for various reasons.
Because he wanted to make his awesome, and me because of mine just didn't work.
That was 30 years ago, though.
What's it been like just the past day and a half? It's been a fire hose. You got maybe a half an hour break. This afternoon was the first break you got, really, since you got here. So what have you been noticing about people you've talked to so far, a lot of whom are in IT,
yes.
A lot of whom are doing different kinds, they're entrepreneurs in one way or another. What do you notice so far?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of conversations, and I think what I like to do is I like to think about how to build things to solve problems, right? So I'm an engineer by training, and so I like to build things. I like the idea of working with people who like to build things. And the thing that I've really enjoyed is talking to people who understand a problem very well, and have a skill that they think that they can bring to the problem. Sometimes it's IT, sometimes it's sales, sometimes it's something else. And they have a perspective that comes from understanding and knowing that problem really well. I think those are really, really important ingredients. And sometimes, and if I spoke with you, I'm sorry, perhaps this is very bold, but I think some people are selling themselves short. I think they think that there's something else they need on top of that.
Yeah.
And there's some kind of permission or some structure. And I think in Silicon Valley, we sit around trying so hard to understand other people's problems. If you read Reddit, it's full of these entrepreneurs who are trying to ask questions about how to get interviews with people. And if you understand a market, if you understand the problem, if you understand the limits of the existing solution, and you're willing to work, I don't think there's a limitation.
Mm-hmm. We both started off, I think, as young people, so it's very, I'll try and restrain myself. When we were young, and the hottest people who wanted to make the most money back when we were students were mainly thinking about investment banking, management consulting, and becoming doctors. And people would look at us and think, oh, you poor little nerds, you're studying really hard, and you must have something slightly wrong with you.
You'll work for us someday.
You will work for us someday, yes. Our history major friends who were whatever. So, and what's been really remarkable is how much, your career has been about pulling up, in a sense, I think, from technology into bigger questions and issues and recognizing. So there's this phrase in English, it's not enough to just build a better mousetrap. That I did something creative, and as long as I build the better mousetrap than what's been built before, isn't that all I need to be an entrepreneur? So Ben, what have you learned from maybe the 18, 19-year-old version of yourself that would think, well, if I build a better mousetrap, isn't that enough to now?
Yeah, so again, I just think a lot of us, myself included, we like the idea of building something better. And if you look at the press, if you look at these stories, it's always, someone built something better and there's a good outcome that comes from it. And that's really the way I thought. And then in my first company, I had to sell the better idea. And that's somewhat humbling because you have to understand someone's problem and appreciate it better than maybe your original idea was. And so a lot of, I think, understanding how this works is making it fit. But I think more generally, let me tell you the story this way, Nolan. Yeah. So when I was, so my background is right out of college, I went and with some friends, we started a company that was involved in computer security. We found some problems with smart cards. It was a very technical problem. It was that cards leaked information that hackers could use to reveal information and reveal keys. And we found that the entire industry didn't have the problem solved properly. And so we worked on solutions, and we thought that if we filed the right patents, we'd be done. And then we thought if we had filed the patents and we explained it to people, we'd be done. And then we thought if we filed the right patents and we explained it to people and we demonstrated the problem, we'd be done. You can kind of see where this goes. And it took actually many years of working in the industry, but we were actually able to, everyone has smart cards in their pocket, and the technology that's running in the cards is probably paying some kind of licensing fee to the company that I helped start. And so that was very exciting for me, knowing that I could work. But I felt this, I felt that I could only be a VP of engineering at some small company. And then when I was 40, I had a chance to run a startup incubator. And the purpose of the incubator was to start significant companies. And so my job was to talk to, was a couple of things. And again, your question was like the ingredients that come in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one thing that's, and again, so it's one thing to work on a company yourself. It's another to try to create a larger number of these. The goal was to make 2 companies a year with something like 10 people. And the first thing you need to have is you need to find people that you think can go the distance. And in my mind, that was someone who had enough experience to know what they were strong in. They were typically someone who was a junior leader in their company, someone who was on the edge of becoming a manager or a strong individual contributor, so they were given the choice. I liked that because that meant that people felt they had the people skills to work with other people, but they also felt that they had enough depth to be respected as an individual contributor. And then at that point, and an interest in becoming part of something bigger. And at that point, we would go and we'd find a problem. And we didn't know exactly what problem. The whole goal of this incubator was to start significant companies in the financial technology space. So we would take a big problem, something like how to buy a house, and start asking questions about why the existing way of buying a house in the United States is not good enough or not sufficient, or not good enough, I shouldn't say. Why there's only a few options available for doing this. Why couldn't there be another way?
Nobody enjoys it. Nobody says like, oh boy, thank God we're in America where you're buying a home is this like quick, process or something.
Well, it's tricky. There's matters of affordability. But then when you look at a problem like this, there's like a very standard way in which you approach it. You have to go through a certain process, use a certain person, you get a certain kind of loan. And by the way, there's many ways to borrow money. How come there's only one kind of loan for buying a house?
But Ben, you didn't go to an economics degree. How dare you? I mean, that's what oftentimes the reaction is like, is how can you, how dare you play in someone else's field in a sense?
Well, before I do that, let me tell you a story, right? So we had this idea of how you could, as an experiment, can you buy a house with a bunch of different people and have the contract have all your names on it in a way that's still legally safe. And I don't know what the rules are in Croatia, but in the United States, this is very difficult, right? Property's not designed to be split this way, not without a lot of problems. So we go to a lawyer and we say, we've done our research. We think that it's possible to structure the contract like this way, this way, this way. We think that it has these terms and this kind of exit. And he looked at us and said, this is possible, but why in the world are you doing this? And I charge, I think it was like $600 an hour, and I don't want to work with you because you're too weird. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with what you're saying. I just think you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the sense of, even the people in the industry think you're crazy.
Yeah.
And so I think why do we even do this? Like, we believe that there is I should back up. The incubator that I came from, that I got to run, had a history of starting companies that changed their industries. So Yelp was started in the United States, which was a restaurant review company. Affirm was started, which was a change in how people can purchase. We started a women's healthcare company called Glow, which helped people conceive. It was a women's period tracker, and it was built in a phase where it was one of the first women's health apps ever, and it's helped 1 million babies be conceived and brought to full term, right? Mm-hmm. So you look at this and you say, in every single one of those, it was people asking the question, we think there's room for something different. Mm-hmm. And part of that process means not focusing on if people in the industry think you're smart or not, but rather focusing on what am I learning? What am I learning about what is important? What am I learning about what's needed? What am I learning about what's missing? And you can't do that by surveying people that work in the industry. They're so used to thinking in a certain way. It's not their fault. If you read Wikipedia about how to do something, if you read Wikipedia about insurance, for example, there will be 3 or 4 categories of insurance you'll see. If you read that, you will be inoculated against thinking about any other form of insurance. Mm-hmm. You're just going to think of these 4 categories. Even the names are beautiful. Even our choice of names. My children go to public school. I could say they go to government school, right? I mean, there's all sorts of different names. Even the names we have make you think certain ways about what you're doing. And so we're very careful to understand the industry, respect the industry, but as we're searching, don't follow their names. Follow how money transacts, follow how the exact steps of the customer journey, follow what people like and don't like, but try not to use the same terms the industry has. Because if you do that, then you're just going to think like them, and they've spent billions of dollars thinking that way. We're never going to beat them.
Yeah. And what's been fascinating for me to think about that, to hear you talking about that, is again, you go in as learners. You didn't hire the most famous experts in the field.
You can't, because they'll tell you you're crazy.
Yeah, and you talk about this as looking for white space. So you've kind of described a lot of that, but say a little bit more, like tell us about the white space idea. That's like the part of the piece of paper that's still white, is the white space.
So when you're trying to do something that's significant and new, you kind of by definition need to go somewhere else than where everyone else is. And if you look at a big industry that's big and complicated enough, there are different ways to solve problems that may be better. And maybe technology is different now that lets you do something you couldn't do yesterday. Maybe there was an old business practice that doesn't make any sense anymore. Maybe there was a certain sales channel you have to buy a certain way that you don't have to do it anymore. So that means it's possible to look around and try different things to be successful. The most interesting ideas I find are ideas that no one else has looked at before, and we call that the white space. So if you're Google searching for a certain idea or a certain item, and we did this exercise yesterday with a few people, if you search on Google for something, most people search for one of the top 1 million search topics on Google, and you will get a good answer because Google makes money by giving you ads and delivering you answers. And they're primarily concerned with about 1 million results, because let's say that you search for the 1 millionth and one interesting topic on Google. And for us, it was, is there a way we can sell a product to small businesses to protect them against rising diesel prices in Croatia? That was the question. We searched for this on Google. If you try this, you'll see that the answers it gives you are not very good. It doesn't tell you it's good, it doesn't tell you it's bad, it just sounds, it's missing. And that means you're in the white space. So we started looking more deeply at, is this a good idea? What would it take to build this? How did people respond to it? And then we came to certain conclusions. And I think we concluded it was not a good idea, but we also concluded several things about how small businesses make decisions and how to do other stuff. But we got to this point by searching for something that didn't exist. It's actually very hard to ask a question that's in the white space. Is that helpful? I mean, I can go into that.
Yeah, but and I think one of the big messages, and we were struggling with it yesterday as a group, but is that idea that to learn to feel good about that being out on your own.
It feels good. When you use Google and you type something in and the results you get are bad, and by bad, I mean someone just searched the internet for those words and they're not that. I mean, you've had this happen, yes? Usually you're like, oh, I asked the wrong question. Let me ask that again. But what you're really doing is you are asking a question that's not in the 1 million top questions that Google has, and they don't bother giving you a good answer. And so I've learned to really enjoy that feeling because you're now in the white space. Now, most of the things you try that are crazy are a bad idea, but you can learn a lot from that experience and refine what you're doing. And that's the most fun place to be because that's not where everyone else is.
That's great. And so that's a little bit about the search process you used, or is there anything else you want to say about the?
I mean, you iterate. So you try an idea like this, you see what you can learn, you test it. Sometimes you test by reading, sometimes you test by making a fake website and seeing how people respond to it. Sometimes you test by talking to an expert and listening very carefully to how they respond. Sometimes you test by having a lot of spreadsheets and modeling if it makes any money, right? And as you get better and better and better, you start making more sophisticated tests, a demo of the product that you get in front of a doctor, for example, and you see if it helps them make better decisions. And those tests then turn into hopefully funding for a company. And even if you're a startup company, you are still testing and you're still iterating. Your goal should be to every few weeks try something new and see what you're learning. See if you can learn something insightful about your customers or the space. So I think the whole thing I've learned that I didn't understand before, I thought building a startup was about like digging for gold and finding it. It's really about efficiently learning more and faster than anyone else about your industry.
Wow, that's great. You mentioned what was the name of the fertility?
Glow.
Glow.
Yeah.
Glow. So maybe that hits on a little bit. What has made for you an investment worthwhile beyond just financial return?
I'll share a little about my last company. So I stopped doing the incubator, and my children play sports. And I started just doing videos of them while they're playing games because I'm terrible at sports. And I thought maybe I could help the team families out by shooting video. And as I started doing it, I started realizing that sports video was well understood, but the biggest challenge with sports video was just getting access to the video. And so I ended up starting a company on this. And it ended up reaching hundreds of thousands of athletes and their families. And one of the things I realized when I started studying or participating in sports is that while people talk about it as a joyful thing and an exciting thing, a lot of what drives parents is this fear that their kid is not good enough. Maybe my child can't play at this level. Maybe the coach is being unfair and I need to figure out how we can fix that. And instead of sitting there and enjoying these moments, enjoying the lessons their children are learning, they're worrying about what's next. Mm-hmm. And so here we were sitting on thousands and hundreds of thousands of hours on video on kids playing sports. And one of the things I told my coworkers was, we are not a sports company. We're a memories company in sports clothing. Mm. That these parents are so busy worrying about what is going on in the field that they're not remembering these moments. Most of them think their kids will play for many, many years or play in college, but the statistics say they won't. And so, you asked specifically, like, how do we look at this? So we took this problem that, my friends look at this and say, oh, it's really nice, Ben, that you're working on sports. And how neat is that? And I think we have a chance to actually build technology that gets in the middle of when people are enjoying themselves or should be enjoying themselves. And then we can deliver these videos to them. So, and when you decide you're a memories company, you change how you make your product. There are certain features you add or you don't add based on that.
Yeah, that's great. My older son played soccer, football very competitively throughout his whole growing up. And somebody told me at one time, and I was really glad for the advice, is like, the first thing out of your mouth when you see your kid afterwards should just be like, I really enjoyed watching you play today. Like win or lose or whatever. And that was really helpful for me because there were times I was like, I didn't know what to say. They lost a big game or something. I was like, it's so much fun as a dad just to be able to be here and watch you play.
So one of the most requested features on our platform was the parents wanted a button they could press. They called it a coachable moments button, but it's really my kid made a mistake. And our technology enabled instant real-time clipping and sending of the video. And I knew what was going to happen if people pushed that button. I knew that when their kid got in the car and they drove home, that they would take the video out and say, like, hey, I want to show you your mistake, right? Because I want you to get better. That's why we're here,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? No. And as long as I'm working on this, we're not gonna put that button in. So that was that, and that was probably one of the more requested features.
Yeah, I think that gets, we're going to try and come back to that. That's a really interesting example of not doing everything technology makes you able to do, but making intentional decisions about what you're going to enable it to do, not just everything it possibly could do. That's a great example. Thank you. So the second area is about entrepreneurship and leadership. And it's a very, very huge topic, but what does effective leadership mean to you when you think about that?
I just had a conversation on that earlier. I think leadership is about helping other people see things in a unified way, and helping see clarity when there's a lot of noise. So the most effective thing that you can do as a startup leader is saying no to something, is to reduce the number of things that your team is worrying about or thinking about, and really protecting them to do that. And I think one of the best ways to do that is actually not to say no. It's to write a mission statement or to explain the goal in a way that's so clear that everyone who's watching kind of gets it.
Yeah.
It's also much nicer than saying no all the time. That's not very fun, right? So and I think that, and the best leaders that I know of technology startups, their message is not we should build this, but like the future is going to be this. It makes total sense. It's going to be this. Everyone knows this is the future. So if it's going to be the future, we might as well figure out how to make it happen a little bit faster, right? And that is a very motivating thing, and it honestly makes you feel like you're taking less of a crazy risk. But those are the kinds of messages that I think really, really help. And that also helps when things don't go well. When you fail a lot and you say, we learned something, and that doesn't change the future. Well, maybe it shifts it a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's what we do.
I love that answer. I mean, talking less about saying no to things and more about setting out a clear vision. Momir, to remember really well with the Global Leadership Summit. We've been doing it for a long time. I think one of the best talks I remember from it is actually a pastor of a church who said, his talk said, vision leaks, and you have to, as the leader, reinforce it over and over and over. You think you've already said it 100 times. People forget, or it's just the leader has a different perception of how much they've emphasized it than the people around them.
And the cleaner you make that message, right? Like, we're a memories company. Well, you know what? That should influence the email that goes out to the user.
Yeah.
That should influence the sign-up process. That should influence how we tell you what you did. And that should open up a whole new class of thinking. Like, why don't we email you on the year anniversary of when your kid did something good and email that to you? No one else did that. I don't know why they didn't. Yeah. So like, you're going to click on that, and we get the engagement we love, but that's because we're reminding you of something great.
Yeah. All right, that's a great answer. Can anybody be an entrepreneur, or what does it take really? What is that really about?
So the funny thing is, I didn't grow up thinking I would be an entrepreneur. I think I grew up. My parents worked for big companies and the government. I just figured that I would do what I love, which is work on technology, have some mentor that was older than me, and like follow them through their career as they progressed. I would just be like one step below them. And I really kind of felt that's the way it was. And I feel very differently now, obviously. I think the way that it works for me is I love the idea of building stuff that no one else is building. And and the goal of this, and what I've had to do is, and I really don't mind failing. I failed a lot. And I try to fail. I don't try to fail often, but I try things at a very fast rate. So, as our company, we try to do experiment every week. On Monday, we get together, decide what we're going to do, and then report back next Monday and see if we thought it was good or bad. And I decided that the best way I can say it is I took my very analytical, very precise joy, and I decided that I would turn it into a joy that comes from learning. And I feel like that's how if that's what you're asking, I was able to convert myself into thinking about that. And that's how I think. When I hear people update me on their companies or even how their church is going, we've done this many things, we've served this many people, we've done this. And I'm like, okay, that's nice. Well, what do you really know differently now than what you know yesterday based on what you did? And based on that, I'm sure if you really know these things, then your numbers will be better next week. You don't need to tell me that. I trust you. But if you tell me you don't know anything different, but you have the same numbers, then that's okay. It's just not what I do.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, we were ridiculously privileged people. We were born in the United States, guys in the perfect little spot of everybody brought the computers home, and then the son in the family was like, "Oh, it's this thing," and then we got to study at this fantastic university, and so there's a ton of privilege there of the chance to have been right place, right time, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But what are some of the things you see when you learn about how, whether if you don't have an advantage in your background, but you kind of are really curious, what are key things you look for? I mean, are you only interested in people that went to Harvard and MIT and Stanford and stuff?
So when I was recruiting for our startup studio, I recruited two different kinds of people. I recruited, we call it entrepreneurs in residence. So that's someone who's started a company before and wants to do it again. And we really like those kinds of people because it reduces the risk if they've gone through some of these things. But a large portion of these people were people I call builders. And these were generally younger people who, again, had a lot of raw capacity, didn't necessarily go to the best schools. But I saw this one really interesting pattern that I've seen too much to not think is true. You would think, I know both you and I grew up in engineer homes with a computer in the house. And I just assumed when I started that those would be the kinds of people that I would find. But I'll tell you, the people that I really, really liked, I mean, this is crazy. Their parents were artists.
Yeah.
and like people that painted, musicians. And I think what it is, I really think this is true. I think they came home every day and they saw their mom or their dad trying to create something and like failing. Like paint, they would tell me stories like they would try to paint, or they would be a book writer. Like they would try and it would have to throw it away, try again, try again, try again. And I think they, from a young child, they watched their parents try, and then finish. I don't even know if it was perfect work. They finished and then they moved on and got to the next one. And this just blew my mind because I thought I was looking for like a junior version. Like it's like, surely if your dad was the world's best engineer, then you'd, but
Yeah.
and yeah, there were some of those. But really it was the children of writers and artists were like the most interesting people.
That's fantastic. That's a great thing to hear. Yeah. I think you mentioned me when we were talking about talk about the willingness to make mistakes a little bit.
So I think everybody in this room, and this changes in your life, has a certain tolerance for making a mistake, like looking bad or going wrong.
Pretty low.
I mean that's yeah.
For a lot of us.
Well,
right?
and I think that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I looked both ways when I crossed the street when I walked over here, right? I mean, so there's certain mistakes that's okay,
Yeah.
but I will say this, and I talk to people who are often very motivated and very bright, and I would say if you tell me what your tolerance is for being wrong, what's your willingness? The question is, how willing are you to be wrong for the pursuit of something great? And for a lot of students, honestly, from like Stanford and Harvard, their willingness to be wrong is fairly low because that's what got them into this great school. They're very talented. They know how to manage their skills. And they follow this path to maximize their odds of doing this, so very well-rounded. They're going to go pick a career trajectory that involves not making mistakes, making choices that don't embarrass their parents.
Yeah.
They're going to get jobs at Google and Meta and Apple, and that's what it's going to make them feel better. And then if you are willing to be wrong and you're willing to make iterations and mistakes, those are honestly the people that are more, for what I was trying to do, more interesting.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah.
That's great. What might surprise people about how you're still growing as a person, I think, at where you're at in life? Like what might people think, make an assumption about you that wouldn't be true?
I mean, I think I just told you that like I really like people who are willing to make mistakes. I fear not doing things the right way a lot, and I have to kind of remind myself that actually I fear about wasting my time, and I fear these things, and it's a constant. I have to constantly remind myself that I'm a child of God who is here to be observant and respond to what's around me, that the mistakes I see, I can apply. And maybe if I can't, that's just part of what's there. And to be willing to look foolish, because I've been rewarded just enough by looking foolish that it sort of worked out. But it actually is something I have to remind myself.
That's great. All right, thank you. All right, so the next big area we wanted to try and hit on some is artificial intelligence. Whew.
No one talks about that.
Yeah, no one talks about that. Yeah. So gut check, are you scared?
No. That doesn't mean I'm not like worried about what might happen. I mean, I think, because I've thought about this a bunch, and maybe I'll just tell you a little bit some of the things, like the framework that I have. One is, let's just define like what artificial intelligence is, or at least how people are using what I see. And this is stuff I just pulled from like I think OpenAI did its own study, and they had three categories. I added another one. So the four categories that I think that we can talk about AI, how people use it and how it can affect us are, it helps us with how we do research, and I think we all understand that when we search information. The second one is, can it help us create, and maybe that's as simple as writing an email, but it could be more sophisticated than that, right? The third one is, can I relate to it? And this is honestly the scariest one, and it's the one that we're starting to see more use of. But it's like, I want I want to talk to a digital companion. I'm not going to say therapist, maybe it is, but it's a companion of some sort. And I think the fourth one is actually execute. In other words, like, am I willing to have my AI, write my email? and send it, or
buy airplane
buy
tickets.
things for me, or right, or and so there's these 4 items, and I actually don't think we're going to see too much broadening of these categories. I think it's going to be there. So when we talk about it, I think it's helpful to think about how the world is changing in these 4 areas. It's clearly very augmentative, and so those who know how to use it in these ways can do. I think all of us have experienced this, right? And we can do things more powerfully. We can understand more deeply, so at the same time, we live in a world where these are being applied, overall. But I think before we start, let's just say those are the 4 ways in which you can think about what AI does, right? And then the next question. Well, did you have a next question?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, is how do we? And I think it's a good idea for us to be able to learn how to use these tools, right? So for my children, I have teenagers, so they may or may not actually be listening to me, but they may watch this video. So I mean, my hope for them is that they are able to use these skills and feel comfortable augmenting who they are, or going. I wouldn't say that. Going deeper, going further, building, playing. Because we have these tools that allow us to do things that maybe we weren't allowed to do before, right? And I think that's just a necessary part of what it means to be kind of fluent in this new age. And then there's something the other side to this, which is am I going to lose my humanity? And we were having this conversation earlier, and I sort of stumbled, I think, on this, which is. There will be people who use AI in ways that are exploitative. There will be people who use AI in ways that trap us. We already don't feel that great about some of the social media things that come. But if you look at social media, the main way in which it has caused a weakness for us is it distracts us and has a very short attention span. I actually think that if you spend more than 5 minutes thinking about a problem, you will have thought more than 60% of the world on that one issue.
Yeah.
Right? And then let's go to 10 minutes. You can spend 10 minutes just thinking or meditating, thinking on this one thing. That's maybe 90%. And so the antidote, I think, to a world that's like this is making sure that we can think with clarity on what's going on, and of course, be careful what you're consuming if you're consuming, you're not thinking. But you know what I'm saying, right? Depending on where you get your information from, this can affect you. But whoever does this, let's talk about the top 1 million pages that Google has. Whoever is doing these things is going to focus on the top 1 million things people get lost in. So get lost in something that for 20 minutes. I think that we'll be able to keep our humanity if we can do that. Not everybody will, but that's what I want to teach my kids.
Yeah. How can you just say a little bit about you and your wife both have had dynamic careers and raising 3 girls. How did you approach? When did they get iPads or iPhones and that kind of stuff?
So, we felt that it was such a necessary part. I mean, there's different people with different things. We felt that it was such a necessary part of socialization for them that it was around middle school period.
So the air show started too early.
Oh, okay. I was wondering what's going on here.
Is the Day of the Army or whatever? Is that tomorrow or something? Yeah, we have new fighter jets. We're very proud of them, and so they're probably practicing for something tomorrow. So
all right.
I don't think this.
Yeah. I was wondering if I should get under the table, but So I mean, I think for us it was giving them the phones, trying to educate them on certain limits, but really we had a lot of problems with this because COVID came, and I had all these I'm a security guy, so I had all these blockers and other things that I installed, and then for their class, they kept getting problems in the middle of their class because they had to go to online school and look at YouTube or something.
Dad blocked the site.
And they're like, I can't get on. My dad blocked it, right? And so actually we don't block, and we tried to do things like have the family keep their phones in a different room at night. I think is important to us. But ultimately, I do wish that there were more ways that we could help them besides kind of stepping away.
Yeah.
But that's what we do.
No, thank you. So, can you tell us? This is so funny.
I can hear you.
are, I mean, are people who are in the know in Silicon Valley stockpiling food, and
Right. Get my bunker.
getting their bunkers ready.
I mean, when you look at all that's going on in the world, and you're someone that's used to being in control, but I think a lot of us like to think that we are, I can get scared.
Yeah.
And there was a time where I was wondering if, I don't think I could afford to build a bunker in Hawaii, but there was a time when I was wondering if I should use some of my skills and talents to prepare an exit. I'm not going to lie on that, but I started to, as I was looking for guidance on this, I was reading the Bible and I found Jeremiah and talking about the Jews when they lived in exile. And it was a message that said, God is with you even when you're not receiving the blessings that you thought you wanted. And in fact, you are being taken care of, but part of what you need to do is just put up with it and support each other. And so I actually don't think I'm allowed to leave. I think I need to stay and I need to be part of my community and I need to do what I can. And it's given me some clarity so that instead of investing my time in thinking about running away, which I do think from time to time, I don't think that's an option. I have to be part of my community.
Yeah, I see both in Creation in America, a lot of discussion about, but we're a Christian nation, and we have this inheritance, whatever. And I go to the Old Testament prophets and I can say it's a pretty dangerous thing to talk about being God's people, because when you kind of look at the whole picture from the beginning to end of what it was like to be God's people, they went through a lot of bad stuff and a lot of God, how could you let this happen to us? So that's not a new thing. Anyway, so that's great. I know you were really struck by the Encyclical that came out this week.
Yeah.
And can you mention something about that? What you noticed in there that was really landed for you?
I mean, so I am not in the habit of reading documents that come from the Vatican, but this document is amazing, and I would actually recommend, if you are interested, it's an encyclical about technology and AI, and there's a very precise language that the Pope uses in deciding if something is good or not. And in Silicon Valley, we have this very short-sighted thing in that we choose to measure things by how much money it makes. And you see this when you look at the press, like who's got the first billion-dollar company, this much money was raised. And I don't necessarily think it means that we're a society that wants money, but it's a society that's really going to measure things. And the thing that's actually more bothersome about that is that we're trusting a very small number of people to set the valuation of these things. Mm-hmm. But that's not the question you asked. The Encyclical, there were two things that I think were really cool. One was a lot of talk about AI has now shifted to people saying, well, what does it mean to be human, right? So how do we protect humanity? And that humanity is this important essence. And what does that mean? And there's a very specific thing that's in the conclusion of the Encyclical, which is, an important part of being human is our weakness. And that just blew me away. I mean, it's and if we build technology that somehow misses the fact that we as humans are weak, and this is actually a nature of who our identity is, that's not what we're to be, right? And I think there's other implications of this, but that was actually very reassuring to me. That my time here is limited. Yeah. My reach is limited. Yeah. And that's actually something that should help me recognize who I am instead of trying to change it. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff there too, but that was my wow statement.
I think it's a fundamental decision for us. I mean, for us as Christians, we'd say that embracing limits is for our good. That are you going to close the? Yeah, you can just close it for a few minutes. They're really going for it. So, but there's a perspective on life that understanding we are alive for a time and we can be thankful. And I think that technology is one of these things that tempts us to think that we should always be extending everything as much as we can, as far as we can, and but actually. Nobody's actually made all that happy by unlimitedness. Children struggle with it, right? It's if children have access to everything all the time, they're not very happy. They do well with some kind of constraints, and we're still like children.
Well, in fact, there's one more thing there, which is I want to use the actual word, but there's language that talks about how to use technology for developing responsible relationships. And again, I just really like the language, because a lot of people in this room, we build technology, and it's like we want this like good or bad. Like, what is good? Well, it's good to build something that helps us develop responsible relationships, whether you're building a dating platform or social media or telling people what's going on in sports, right? And then another specific one is like we want to help children when they use technology to foster inner freedom, right? Doesn't mean we should censor the internet, but it does mean that when we work on material that will come across when they're using, Instagram, we're hoping that they experience inner freedom. And I think that's worth defending. And I actually like the way that it doesn't give you a solid yes or no, but it tells you this is what we should shoot for.
That's fantastic.
It's very precise language.
Really appreciate that. And maybe last in this area, what perspective do you think previous hype and disappointment cycles in technology maybe help? We can't predict the future, but what, based on the previous cycles that we've lived through, what insight do you think maybe that gives?
Well, I've lived through a couple cycles now. There was the .com cycle that occurred shortly after we left school. There was, if you just go 10 years ago, the hottest items, and if you're the right age, you remember these things like location-based apps, Pokemon Go, Uber, Internet of Things, chatbots. If you look now, clearly there's this like hype around AI. So there's been, Silicon Valley anyway is full of these like phases of people believe that there's somehow social proof that they need to do something, and so they should all do it, and then everyone jumps in. And that ends up creating a bubble, of course, and I think that's sort of there. That doesn't really surprise me. I saw the same thing occur with virtual reality and other things. And what happens when there is a bubble like this, or I'm not going to use, what happens when there's a lot of attention and hype on something is you can imagine that there's like this land that we're searching, and there's like these gigantic searchlights that are now being beamed down because money is being poured in. Mm-hmm. And it's being poured into like a very small area, actually.
Yeah.
In fact, from what I can tell, and I'm not an AI expert, but LLMs are somewhat limited.
Yeah.
They don't support the full degree of reinforcement learning or other techniques that our human brain uses. And they may be able to work, but at tremendously inefficient ways. So, like, I'm sure people are spending money on that too, but man, they're spending a lot of money on LLMs. And so, like, okay, that's fine. They can do that if they want to. It's probably not a good idea for me to work on that because there's like $1 billion+ going into this. But it will move on, and that's okay. That's just part of like how growth goes. I just wish that it was a little more thoughtful because it seems a little wasteful.
Yeah, there's been large amounts of money lit on fire in each one of those cycles.
Yeah, and people celebrate how much money they light on fire. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of the press.
There was a famous 30, 20 some years ago, but you probably have heard this, the most expensive advertisements, TV commercials in the world are for the Super Bowl because it's live and most America's watching it, and companies were just lighting on fire their money there was like one Super Bowl where every single ad almost was like pets.com and furniture.com and all this kind of thing. I mean, and then they do it again.
When there's press in Silicon Valley, this is a $100 million company. That means that they raised $100 million and are actually lighting it on fire. It doesn't mean they made $100 million. So it's just it's just another way to seek social proof. And that's okay. We get things done that way. It's just a little odd.
Yeah. All right. Well, you've lived and worked as a person of conviction, as a Christian, in Silicon Valley for more than 30 years. You're a father, a husband. What has that been like? Is Silicon Valley anti-religion and anti-God? Have you experienced that?
I would say that Silicon Valley celebrates what people can do on their own. And it celebrates the people who are able to wield influence and power as a result of this. That doesn't mean there's no God, but it is easy to get high on what your fellow person is doing, right? And I think for me, like perhaps some of you and many of you, I believe that we have a God who is in charge. And one of the things that's been a little hard, because you asked is, do I feel alone? And one of the things that I've been trying to do is find a way to show the people that are with me in a way that's respectful of what they believe, what I do, what I believe. And I found when I worked in my first job, I didn't have the influence to tell people you should think. I never do, but I found the best way I could represent what I believed was to choose to volunteer in certain areas that I could share with my friends. So I volunteered to work in this great inner city program where I worked with kids that didn't have a lot of money, right?
And with a strange thing that might be hard to understand is that there is a massive amount of socioeconomic difference. Sometimes you can drive a few kilometers in Silicon Valley and be in a completely different environment.
Right, and so I worked with kids whose parents cleaned houses and were gardeners and somehow were making it work in this pretty expensive place. And so I chose to do that because, well, it was a good cause, but I specifically chose to do that because I would go to my coworkers at a startup, right? We're working till 8 p.m. and they go like, hey guys, I'm gonna leave at 4 p.m. today. Is that okay? I'm gonna work with high school kids. Oh, okay, yeah, you can go, right? And so it became easier for me to share what I was doing to my community when it was visible and kind of safe. And I think now, as I've gotten older, I've been able to share some of that influence, but also, again, I think in ways that are still respectful. So I mentioned earlier that I said I started the company. I told everyone, hey, we're a memories company. We're a memories company in sports clothing. And one of the things that happens when you have hundreds of thousands of young people on your platform is you find out every once in a while that a teenager dies, accident or other things. And sometimes we find out about it because we, through some way. And one of the things that we started doing as a company is we've never publicized this. One of the things that we started doing was when we found out about this, we realized that we were sitting on their memories. We were sitting on not only memories, but we were sitting on real significant moments that they would enjoy. And so we would put together a USB stick of all the video that we could, and we'd write a card, and we would send it to either the family or we'd send it to the person that recorded the video. And I mean, we did this because it was the right thing to do. So to be clear, I didn't do this to share my faith, but it was a chance to remind the people I work with that we mean what we say when we do hold these people's memories the highest and best. I can't think of a better use for someone's memories. And I know that sometimes these videos have gotten shown at the funerals and things. And we actually play the video in the company meeting, and we have a moment of silence. The families don't know we do this. And I think it's important for everyone in the room to understand the reach of what we build. And I hope that somewhere in there, people can get a taste of what it means to build for a higher purpose. And I think in the privilege that it is to do that.
That's great. Something that reminds me of Jyoti's husband, Drajan, brought an entrepreneur here once to a company about 200 people. And he just kind of said, most people go through one or two big life events a year: birth of a child, death of a close relative, something kind of big happens to you. And he had just made it a priority that his secretary would find out about these things. And so there'd be bouquets of flowers, there would be whatever. And it was just this it wasn't a huge gesture, but he just said, this is the kind of person I want to be. I want them to know that as a company, we're engaged in this part of life. And I thought that was really just a good thing and some systematic way to approach that. And I appreciate what you said there lots. I asked about the bunker already. I guess, we live, you were talking about this before, there are certain people that are known by their first names: Mark, Elon, Steve, whatever. And I think what happens is the further you're away from, sometimes it feels to me like the further you're away from the center of all that stuff going on, the more those characters take on. I feel like people I hear creations talk way more about those big personalities than I hear them when I'm in Silicon Valley just talking to people. When maybe they don't seem like such Olympic gods when they're not so far away or something. And I also know how much engineers tend to say I can't believe he said that in public. We're nowhere near ready for that. There's a whole different layer on which you're really interacting with people who work on all this stuff all the time, and it feels very, very pedestrian to them. I mean, how do you think about the top line stuff, the big headlines, the very, very famous people in those circles. As a Christian, as a person who tries really hard to think about doing the right thing in what you're doing.
So you're saying, how do I feel about these household names, or how do I feel about what they're doing, or how do I feel about?
There's this ethos that I think scares a lot of people. I mean, they now seem more powerful in governments. And,
they are.
And yeah.
They are.
Yeah. So and you want to be, I mean, you've said you've thought about, okay, maybe it's time for me to make my exit, but I don't feel like I'm called to leave. I don't know, is there anything else you think of about kind of how you process that amount of power that's concentrated in?
I don't necessarily know if I think it's dangerous to feel that we're in control just because we like the person who's in power or that we feel comfortable with them, because I think that's misleading. And I think we live in a world that's very uncertain. I'm not sure it's better or worse that we have like individuals. I think those people are doing their job to some extent. I mean, their job is to build a brand, and that brand enables them to, for example, raise a lot of money at a discount, which is what a lot of people have been able to do. It just so happens that there's all this other persona that's in there. So I think they're doing what they're supposed to do. Do I wish society would elevate these people to that point? I don't think it's helpful. Have they let me down? I mean, it's not like they owe me anything. Sometimes. I mean, I've let myself down. So, but I feel that when you're in a position like that with responsibility, it would be nice to use your platform to say, maybe I have enough money, and there are other things that I should be worrying about instead. And that's actually part of the reason why I'm excited about the Pope's Encyclical, because I actually feel that there are portions of that document that I can copy and paste and send my friends who do not share my faith and say, I think this is a decent framework to talk about what's being built. And part of the reason is because there's like no other voice that is anything like this. And so I am disappointed that there's not more voices. And I don't necessarily, we both know people who worked at these companies and were in rooms where decisions were being made that they probably didn't agree with, but they didn't feel they could say anything, right? So yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah.
No, it's sobering to know that even those people are responding to many incentives, and these companies go public. It means that the ownership of that company is spread very, very broadly. Now they're accountable then to those people who bought shares, and they're accountable to make that business grow and become ever more profitable. So if they have a choice between something that would be slightly socially more beneficial, come at a slightly reduced profit rate or slower rate versus just whatever's going to maximize profit, it's very, very hard for them to make a decision like that, right?
Oh man, there's like a line from the Encyclical. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think the purpose of something like Babel syndrome is the idolization of profit that abuses the weak, or something like this. And I was like, whoa. Yeah. So, well chosen words.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how, like, I think you go into an iPhone. I use whatever. I'm not trying to make that political. I use an iPhone. I think Android probably has similar stuff now. But the amount of stuff in the accessibility settings to help people who have different kinds of needs, it's astonishing. Like what that kind of technology is meant for people who can't see or can't hear or have different kinds of limitations. I mean, it's life-changing. But that's one part of the picture. And then you wish, like, I wish it would be a little bit better for me in my weakness of how easily distracted I am. I can just push a big button that says, like, never, don't distract me anymore. But then that's like fiddling with every single setting to kind of, go in there. It's yeah. All right. Well, we're close to the time we want to ask people questions, but I thought I would just come back to this one more time. People have really strong internal negative self-talk a lot. Not everybody, but many, many people do.
Yeah.
And I think we ran into it a little bit in some of our conversations with people about, that's, the I think one of the most powerful sayings in creation is blago tebi. You know, this is kind of, which is like, that's nice. It means blessed are you, but it's a way of saying it's easy for you.
Okay.
And that was kind of the response we got a little bit when we were discussing startups and saying like, you know, it's just a mindset, it's just an attitude. It's like, yeah, but you're from Silicon Valley was a little bit of the interaction, right?
Yeah.
Easy for you to say kind of thing.
Yeah.
So just maybe to end there, maybe if there's anything else you want to add to that about how taming your inner negativity is probably, you know, the role that plays.
I mean, maybe I'll say two things, right? I'll speak maybe more as an investor, and then I will speak to you as my new friends, if I may be so bold, right? As an investor, your job is to find opportunity that's undervalued. It's so undervalued. I mean, look, you want to find people who understand the problem space really well. You want to find people who are well educated, who have the tools and have the experience. You want to be in a place where you have the relationships that in the network that can begin to let you become successful in selling. You operate in a world where you can actually transact pretty easily because of the location of where this country is, right? And so all of these things come into saying, like, does that mean you can create the exact same venture company that you saw in TechCrunch or whatever here? No, right? But the problems that excited me the most were people who were working on something where they saw traction, got joy in seeing that traction, and could repeat it. And I don't see why that can't happen here. And there's so much proof of it. We visited a company today earlier that was exactly proof of that. So, like, I can see nothing geographical that there may be a change in the kinds of problems that you work on, but I mean, I change the problems I work on all the time just based on where the searchlight is. Like, don't work on LLMs, right? Work on something else, right? So it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
Silicon Valley's solutions are fantastic at addressing what a 23 or 24-year-old finds annoying living in San Francisco, who probably doesn't really like talking to people that much and would rather have something between an app between, you know, it's like,
I'm going to be a little defensive of my
no,
but I mean, I think Silicon Valley is designed for companies that fit a venture profile. A venture profile is something that can give the seed investor 30 times money back when the company sells. Because 9 out of 10 of them will fail. And then that means the fund can return 3 times the amount of money that was put in. That's the math. That's the math that works. And there are things that fit that profile and there are things that don't. And because the investors want to be investing in more companies, they issue a lot of press. They talk to the press and they want to publicize when they give money because they want the next entrepreneur to come to them first. So the press likes us because they like to talk about money. So we just magnify this one story and this one model. My first company did not take venture money, okay? So, like, you can do this without that kind of funding or that kind of perspective, right? So that's the investor one. And as an investor, I am trying to find things that are not overvalued, right? And so if you're feeling that you can't do this, well, yeah, you're undervalued. Now, how you're going to solve that, I don't know. You have to figure that one out yourself, right? So now let me speak as a more personal, right? Like, you've been given certain gifts. Not everyone here is supposed to start a company, but I think everyone here is supposed to use their creativity and their talents to build and support others. Some of the things that we talked about, and I'll talk about tomorrow here, are how to use these frameworks in a nonprofit way. I'm involved in all sorts of experiments to try to start certain trends that use certain techniques. And I think we are supposed to, I mean, that's where I think we can and we should, and we get a lot of joy out of doing those things. Some of you in this room, you should be working on something that can make some money and that solves a need and build something that is missing in the world. Even if all you do is build something that displaces something bad or evil, I think you're still doing, like, noble work. That's kind of how I think. I didn't start these companies thinking I would, like, do some massive good. I did think I could displace bad things with what I was creating.
Yeah.
So that's my personal charge.
That's fantastic. And so, tomorrow at 9, we have one last little seminar, and it's targeted for nonprofits. So if there's anyone here in the room who does nonprofits, kind of different social ideas that you have, still have some space, you can come talk to me afterwards. That's fantastic. So thanks. So while you're thinking about questions, or anybody have a question right away you're ready for. I will look at what, and then some of you submitted ones here. So this is an interesting one. Relating to Yelp, how do you think the role of reviews, local community, and organic discovery in building niche food brands, especially when we don't have the budgets of the big players? So somebody who was thinking about, I would guess they're building a niche food brand. It's based on your experience with Yelp, any encouragement or thoughts on how to do that when you don't have the capacity?
Okay, so sometimes when you're trying to figure out how to use something, you should understand why something exists. So I'll give you a little backstory on Yelp. Yelp was actually started by somebody who moved to a new town and wanted advice on how to find a doctor, and found it very strange that the only thing you could do is open this book. In the United States, it's called the Yellow Pages. This book that's a directory where the size of the ad depends, measures how trustworthy the person is. So in other words, how much money that person spent on advertising their business, which is kind of similar to Google Ads today, actually. We just kind of do it differently. So it was designed for that. It began this sort of wisdom of the crowds where search engine optimization and ratings and reviews are very, very important, right? And so that's kind of how this exists. The challenge is that all of these platforms exist in a way that values people that spend more money on getting attention, right? And so I think your specific question was, if you want to start a niche food brand, what do you do about this? Yeah. There's two ways, I think. So the specific question relates to something that I call distribution, which is how do I get my idea or product in the hands of other people? So that's the technical term if you want to look it up, right? And there's two different ways you can do distribution. One way is you can use what I call traditional methods, which is I'm just going to go buy ads like everybody else. I'm going to go buy ads on Google. I'm going to list a restaurant, and I'm going to charge all these great deals and give people coupons and all sorts of things, right? And you can do that. There's ways of doing that. But I don't like doing that kind of stuff because the standard distribution channels are all auctions, right? Whoever wins the auction is the most desperate person, usually. And do you really want to be the most desperate person? I mean, for the first month of your restaurant, sure. But do you really want to be the most desperate person for a couple of years in a row? Very dangerous, right? Mm-hmm. So the other method is, okay, what do I do? Are there other ways that I can obtain distribution? And that's when you can get crazy, right? Like maybe you can partner with a business. Maybe you can partner with a school. Maybe you establish your own personal brand, right? These are all different ways alternative means to get news out there. And I don't, or you just decide that I know this is the way the system works. I just have to figure out how to make my food for cheaper, which I think is a dangerous thing also because I think that's a race to the bottom. Mm-hmm. But those are, I mean, at least I don't have the answer to the question, but like just realize what you're buying when you think about this. You can either pay at an auction to buy a standard product, which is not even guaranteed to work, even if people click on your ad, or you can find other things. I generally try not to work on something, or I'll experiment with it, but I will try not to really go work on something unless I believe I have a unique form of distribution that does not involve buying ads on Google, because again, I can't win that auction, not repeatably.
There's other people more desperate than you are who are going to pay
or people who will make more money on each click than me. So if I compete for my 10 euro restaurant and someone with a 500 euro restaurant advertises, then they're going to make a lot more money than me, and so they're going to pay more for the click. Mm-hmm. I can't win that.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I can, but it would be bad.
Great. Right. Fantastic. But I want to be the first to ask the live question. And you can ask in Croatian, and I can help translate if that's a problem. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so when you were talking about AI, and you said it's your word. Okay. And another point, we mentioned that there are a couple of people holding this power in their hands. Yeah. They're mostly working in their niche. Is your word, like for the future, more about how good this technology, how powerful it could be, or more about lack of critical thinking of people confronting this technology?
That's a great question.
Yeah. So
thank you.
let me see if I can repeat that a little bit, right? Like, to what extent is the concern that this powerful thing will be led in with bad intentions like that, or?
Yeah, so we assume that in many cases, this technology will be used not in a common interest.
Yes,
So
okay,
in order
yeah.
to influence, to spread disinformation, like
Right.
To do whatever.
Right.
And it will clash with the common interest.
Yeah.
And people can fight against this. One way of thinking is with a lot of critical thinking. So we had, before AI, actually it's not before AI, AI was just not on a front
Yeah.
of this, but with social media.
Yeah.
We already lost that value.
Yep.
And we could say we did with television too, right? I mean, these.
But the scale is, like it's exponentially more powerful.
I mean, maybe I can go one step just a little bit higher, which I think there's two general concerns, perhaps I would say. There's probably more, but I can only think of two with AI. One of them is that we feel displaced by AI because it's replacing some of our capabilities, right? The second one is if someone can influence this information channel, does it affect me? But let me go to the other one for just a second, right? Which is, I think the reason why we are concerned about AI is that there's a sort of social contract that we have, which is if I put in the work, I go to school, I get educated, I get certified, then I become an expert in this. And I should deserve to get a good living working as an expert in this field. And all of a sudden, I can ask ChatGPT this question, and it kind of does that. And I feel like that is, or my earned, so that's my credentials. Even the power of my work, for those of you who've used Claude, it's kind of eye-opening, like what it can do for you, right? So that's my actual work that's being replaced, right? And so these are things that I think we do have to deal with, and I think do have real implications. And I think the answer is to focus more at the end of the, how do I say this? I try to encourage my kids to focus on how to relate with people because I feel like that's an element that's not as likely to change, but specific skills could certainly be changed by AI and their need for certain items. The second question is like, if you control the information channel, can you change how people think about things? And I think we have a lot of evidence for that happening kind of already as it is. The big thing that technology has given us is a strong degree of personalization. And that personalization generally means that whoever owns these things can channel you in different ways. And I already think they're being managed very badly. Some of my friends that work on chat and moderation say, we already have a system right now where the AI, we can analyze we can analyze things, and we can give you things in your newsfeed that are interesting, that are uplifting, that will challenge you. We can surface things that foster good and healthy conversation. We can remove things that have conversation that's not helpful. And the powers that control these platforms right now have decided that that's not as important, that people actually want to fight. And they want the distraction of looking at whatever they're looking at on their phone. And it's more profitable to do that. So I already think these are being managed very badly, actually. Badly because I don't think they need to make as much money. I think they could do much more good for our society based on making certain choices. And I think the technology exists to do that. So does it get worse when you have an AI friend that knows you really well and is going to have you do these things? Yeah, it probably does. But honestly, I'm more concerned about like how we will respond to this fact that some of our expertise is going to be less valued.
That is very sobering. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Well,
We didn't finish the conversation about the colleges and our teenagers going now. So what should they choose?
yes. What majors?
Yeah.
I mean, when you talk to so many people, people have so many different paths. And I think my hope is simply that whatever they choose to study, they can go as deep as possible. And I would prefer if it involves some degree of critical thinking, because I think that's a nice skill to have. But I think as long as they take full advantage of whatever it is they're studying, including talking to people in the field, I don't think I can control that. And I don't think I should tell them to. When they were younger, I thought I wanted to teach them how to code. I'm not gonna. And I do feel that is probably not the best fit, even if it was, not the only path now.
Yeah. You addressed debt financing, that you didn't have it in your first startup. Can you just kind of go back to that a little bit? Because the question was, how did you solve the debt financing problem for your first startup? And the answer is partially you didn't do it. So
You mean venture
Did you
financing.
do some debt?
No. So how did we solve it for the first one? Yeah. We started as consultants. So when I joined my co-founder, he already had in fact, at a previous company, I'd hired him as my consultant. That's how we got to know each other. And we became friends, and we stayed in touch, and then we ended up going in much more deeply and co-founding the company together. And we started by selling our time by the hour. We did work in our specific area, and we tried to make sure that their contracts were written in a way where we could keep some of the technology that we developed, so it didn't all go to the customer, because typically when you work as a consultant, sometimes that happens. And we worked in security. And one nice thing about, and sometimes we would actually work a lot more than we would charge. So we might, say we work for 20 hours. And honestly, when you're starting out, you work much more than 20 hours and you book for 20. But we would make sure the time we spent was not spent just working on that person's problem, that it was spent learning in a more general way. So that knowledge would help us learn about the industry. And so we did that. And then when we filed for patents and we thought that the whole world was going to understand our solution, they were going to pay us, they didn't. It took a long time for that to happen, and we had to continue working. But then I started working for securing pay television. And that contract turned into the opportunity to sell a new way to protect satellite TV systems, right? And then some of the consulting we did for movies, Hollywood, and protecting them, turned into a big project we did to try to make a new system that protects videos. So if you have a Blu-ray player at home, which probably nowadays is not so important, but when you have a Blu-ray player, using a technology to protect the discs, some of which came from our company. And we actually built that. And that was our first real swing for the fences. We built this and we went to Hollywood studios and technology providers and said, you should put this in the format. They did. And then it became successful and discs started using our technology. And they said, we're a very big Hollywood studio. We spend a lot of money on this movie. We don't like the fact that there's a 25-person company that's responsible for our security. Is there any way you could find a better partner? And at that time, we actually sold. So we actually sold that division of our company. And we received, I think it was $60 million. And that was obviously equivalent to a large round of financing. And so we took most of that money and actually used it to continue building our company. So we were able to bootstrap. I don't think it can always be done, but it gave us a lot of freedom, and it let us ride through certain cycles. I also think if we had a VC investor, they would have told us to stop doing too many things and just focus on one thing. And honestly, it was probably better. It was better for us in hindsight to work on the things that we did. Huh? They would have told us to stop consulting. We were like, we're paying you. Stop making money per hour. We're paying you to take risk. Go take risk. And I think we learned enough during that. So for us, it was better.
Wow.
So you can do it without venture capital. We did.
That's great.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question on this. What's it like to fundraise in Silicon Valley, especially in these early stages?
Sure. So what's it like to fundraise? So, well, first of all, let's remember there's a couple reasons that you're trying to raise, right? One is you're trying to get money to survive, right? But who you get the money from is somewhat important too, because it validates your company. So in other words, as they say, the color of your money kind of changes how people might look at what you're doing. And so that's kind of the goal, right? And I think a lot of Silicon Valley is this is where some of the relationships do kind of come into play. It's a little bit, you can always email these people and they'll take a visit with you. It's often helpful if you can get an introduction from someone else. It kind of removes some of the challenge. But sometimes you don't know them and you have no choice and you just send an email, and then they send a person who talks to you, and that person's usually a little more junior, and you have a conversation on the phone, and you have to do your best job. You usually come with what we call a pitch deck. So that's something like 8 slides or something like this that says, in a very early company, the first slide might be the team, because you want to talk about like, I've done this before, or I know someone, or we all worked at this company, whatever. And then the next one talks about the problem, your solution, why it's going to be really big, and then what you're going to do. So that's kind of what you present. And the story you want to present is basically similar to, you're asking really someone to make a bet on you. And so you have a specific goal. The goal is not to fund my idea. The goal is to fund me until I get to this milestone. Because then I'm going to come back and ask for more money if everything goes well, right? And so you say, my plan is to get product market fit and reach this degree of traction and have 2 customers in place in the next 18 months. And in exchange, or not, and to do that, I need $800,000. I need $1 million, right? Depending on what kind of size you need. And that's kind of the way that conversation goes. And some of the strategy in raising involves investors are, there's a lot of very smart investors, but the pool of investors tends to follow certain trends. And so there's certain times where certain things are very hot and certain times when they're not. And so there's certain, honestly, that's why when I look at someone and their startup has worked or they didn't work, I really try not to judge them by that result. I mean, you've already seen and that's because I judge someone by the hand they were dealt. Sometimes you can find yourself in a situation where your idea is not fundable. Right? But generally speaking, you need to be very open. People are very worried about over-revealing their idea. VCs are never going to sign an NDA. And you generally have to not be afraid about that, because you have to believe that what you have is not your idea. It's, someone used to say, it's not your it's not your y-intercept, it's not where you start, it's the slope that you have. And so you're selling this fact that I have a team that will learn and grow and achieve this faster. And even though I have this very hazy view of what's going to happen, you should trust us to go that distance. The more experienced teams can just say, like, do you know who I am? This is my name, and that's a little different, but that's there. And then you practice by making pitches. And you learn more and more about how to get better by seeing how people respond. And they're human. They like to hear stories. They're swayed by what they were thinking. You can get different ones. Honestly, the most frustrating thing about fundraising is that investors will say, let's talk again. Yes. They won't say no. They'll say, well, let's just keep talking, or maybe not right now, come back later, because nobody wants to say no to you, because then you're going to get mad. And then you might make some amazing discovery and come back in 2 weeks, and then I've said no. So they will kind of string you on. And that's actually the really frustrating thing. And I think the better investors will be a little more respectful, but it's still hard. And also, I used to be more involved in investing. I didn't like it because it involves saying no to people a lot. And they're sharing their dreams with you, and you really like them, and you like their idea. But you have to say no 19 times out of 20 as an investor. And your friends pitch you.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Great.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
You said how you really protect your idea. You said only by signing NDA.
You usually can't. When you're going to an investor, you usually can't ask them to sign that. They're not going to. So that's the challenge, right? And so your belief has to be that you can climb faster and you can go harder. And generally speaking, even when founders talk to each other, a lot of the culture is like, they're usually reasonably open about what they're doing. No one gives you all of the secrets, but you don't want to tell someone your timeline or what specific feature you're going to launch when. But if we're both working in the same field and it's like, I'm not going to change very much by telling you I'm also doing this. Maybe I'll learn something by talking to you.
But you have to disclose the innovation as it is.
Yes, and in the first conversation, you can do it in a way that's a little bit more vague if you need to. But generally speaking, the first conversation is, I believe that I can sell this version of the product, not the grand vision, this first version of the product, and achieve this kind of traction by this date. Because that's what you'd want to tell. If I was asking you to pay me money or give me money, you'd want to hear something like that, right? That's basically what a pitch looks like. And there's different ways of talking about it and everything else, and there's different strategies. I mean, but yeah, essentially, there's very little. The demand is basically that you be pretty open about what you're doing, and you kind of trust them not to. But there are stories of people who, when you pitch an investor, you usually try to find out if they have a company already that's doing the same thing. Because if they do, they're not going to fund you, and they're probably just they may pass some information on it. It happens.
Maybe I'll,
Can you
go ahead.
build a startup today without multiple AI agents?
Mm.
And especially with regards to what you said, white space. Is it white space?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, the one of the key items that a startup's job is not to use AI or use technology. A startup's job is to, again, like my goal isn't to build a company. It is, but my goal isn't to achieve the company goal right away. My goal is to prove that the term is product market fit, but the goal is for me to tell you that I know exactly what the customer wants. I have tested it in front of enough customers. I've seen that they want it. When they use it in a good way, and it indicates they will pay me more money in the future, right? And I know this as a fact because I've done it, I've demoed it, I've tried it, I've done it. That's what when you're at the earliest stage of a startup, that's your job. It's to get as much insight as possible, not necessarily to get as much money as possible from your customer, right? And so that is what you're paying for. And the most precious I'm answering your question, but along the way, the most precious resource that you have as a startup founder is time. And it's actually, time is money. You're paying salaries maybe, but it's really time, because if you're going to hire the smartest people you know and have them work with you, and you can't do anything for 5 months, they're going to leave, and you will get tired of working. It's a human thing. So the question isn't, do I use AI agents? The question is, can I operate and learn fast enough without an AI agent? And I would say if you're trying to build something, it's probably much better to use it. If you truly are in a very competitive field where everyone's doing the same thing, which I do not recommend. If you really are doing something and there's like 5 other people doing the same thing as you and it's just a flat out race, I just told you I like the white space. I don't want to do that. There are people, but there's people who do that. They just think they can execute better. But in that situation, the time does matter. And yeah, every tool you have to make yourself more powerful helps. I'll say one final thing. The other good thing about AI agents is the more people you have in the company, yes, it costs more money, but it also takes more time and overhead. So communication is an n squared problem. So if there's 2 of us, there's one communication path. Yeah. If we all work together in a company, there's so many different individual relationships, and that adds. We have to talk about our vision, our mission, everything else.
Feelings.
And well, yeah, I guess we don't have feelings in Silicon Valley, but all of these things, that's actually why these force multiplying tools are so powerful. It's not just because you're saving salary. It's because a few people can move very, very quickly. And that speed is very helpful.
There seems to be this hype that there's going to be a boom of single person startups that will reach 1 billion valuation.
Yes.
Will that happen, you think? And is that important? Will investors only invest in someone who seems to be going that way?
Right. In fact, I posted something else the other day. My comment was, how come the press cares so much about one person solving $1 billion problem, and no one talks about one person like winning a Nobel Prize, because I think they're kind of the same thing, right? Like, and again, that just tells you the value system of the entire ecosystem. Okay, so just reminds you of like why you don't need to follow everything that we see there, because that's how everyone's wired. But so I believe that the companies I founded, I can't imagine doing it without my co-founders. In Sideline, one of my co-founders are all completely different than me, different personalities, different skills, different ways of dealing with people, different ways of talking to customers. Some of them saw things I just couldn't see. Some of them could build faster than me. A lot of them were more patient than me. Some of them, and that was actually, that human element was very, very important for what we were doing. We ultimately have to trust each other a lot. But just to be clear, when you're in a company or you're in a small group of people and they're all different than you, like, it's hard. You don't handle conflict the same way. You don't. But if you have a shared goal, it's okay. And so my answer to you isn't, do you have to have only one person? It is, I think there are certain people I wouldn't want to do this without. And if there's people who you have with you where you're like, I don't know why this person's here, then you definitely, do it one person. Don't do that, right? But there are certain problems that you can probably work on with one person, but I like the unfair advantage of having people that are better than me in certain things working with me.
And kind of some potentially from very different backgrounds, like their interests and their just their life story up until the point, right? It's different.
Yeah, and there's sort of this, the movie is that like the startup founders are all best friends and you live in an apartment together and you do everything together. And there's companies like that. But I will say that on the teams I've been on, we're different enough. We will do anything together. We will be in a foxhole together. We'll do anything. But we might not hang out on a Friday night. And actually, if we do, we don't want to because we'll just talk about work, right? And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, if you want to, I think if you probably just look up Stanford on YouTube, Stanford, like Ben Jun or a cryptography research, he and his co-founders recently did a come back to school and talk to students. And it was the first time the three of you had been together.
Yeah, so it was me and it was three of us that got back together and we talked at our college. And the main focus was actually just how different the three of us were. There was a chief scientist, there was the head engineer, me, and there was our business person. And I think we really picked each other because each one of us thought that we really had incredible respect for the other. And so, but it was not like just because we liked each other, we didn't have a lot of conflict. We had to work through a lot of things. But I will do anything with those two other guys. Again, like that's how strong we feel. But again, we're very different. And so just because even planning that talk was a little interesting.
Yeah,
we all were like, no, we're talking about this. No, we're talking about this. No, so it's what it is.
All right, maybe one more. Ante, one more question?
Like a kind of big broader question or like a thought exercise, whatever you want to frame it. So let's say that you have like some MVP and you like enter like a Silicon Valley without some connections or one relationship. So how would you like navigate through like space? Obviously there's a lot of like noise there. So how would you like, what would you like do first? Like,
can you say what MVP is?
When you're building technology, everybody has a grand vision for how this thing is going to work, the finished state they want to reach, the whole beautiful, the marketplace you want to build. But there's one thing you don't really want to spend your time building the whole thing because your whole vision is probably not correct. You want to build just enough where you can test it and see if people like it, want it, respond to it, how they like it. The best possible case you can have as a startup is when you have a minimum viable product, which honestly you as a founder think is kind of embarrassing. It's not complete, but there's like all these people who are knocking on your door who want it. that's the best feeling ever. And I had this feeling occur once, right? So when we were working on this thing and we had a Google sign-up list, and people wrote why they wanted to join the beta program. And then when we hit this point, the people who were submitting actually got rude. They were like, I need your product now.
How dare you?
I'm more qualified than the other person on your beta, like let me in. And so that was actually a very positive signal. So anyway, that's the minimum. So that's the background. So the question is, if you have an MVP and you want to start shopping it out, I guess is the term, I guess my question would be, if you can demonstrate real customer use, called traction, if you can demonstrate customer traction and sales, and you can share that vision, I think that's like probably one of the most powerful things that you can do. Generally speaking, if you're someone if you come and say, I have this idea, but I have nothing other than an idea, you're not going to get very far. People want to see something because again, what you're looking for in funding is, I have this thing, I am here, I want to get here in this time frame, therefore I want money so that you can help me get from here to here. And if I don't hit that, then I will have failed. Just be clear, most startups fail. If I do hit that, then I'm going to come back and ask for more money to get to here. Right? That's the story. And so you have to convince them that you are going to get from here to here. And the best way to do that is through evidence of customers. Ideally, what a VC will do then is actually call your customers and like ask them how it solves their problem and if it works. I'm happy to make an introduction if it would help. But if you just have an MVP and nothing else, it's honestly kind of challenging. And this is even for people in Silicon Valley. The greatest fear a VC has right now is that with AI and people's speed of execution, they are afraid that your idea will just be copied by somebody else. And therefore, they're nervous about how much they should go in. And so they're looking for ideas that are defensible because of who you are, who you know, your path. Maybe your data becomes valuable. All of these things are things that make that safer. Because even though there's more money than ever, when I talk to VCs, I see that they're actually fearful too, because they're like, I have this great company in backing, but two people who are using Claude might be able to copy it. And so they have to think, they're looking for certain things that are like more, I guess we call structurally strong. So we can talk more offline about this, but in general, you're looking for any proof point that shows you can get from here to here and who you know, what you've done, who's paying you, all these things.
Great. Maybe one last formal question, but we're not going anywhere. We've got lots of drinks and lots of refreshments and stuff, and so, but just to let the formal part come close to an end. There was one question that someone wrote was, is there a practice or maybe a Bible verse or something that's been particularly meaningful for you? And again, as a believer, is trying to keep himself centered in your daily life or in your a moment maybe you remember. It's a new question that came in, so I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but can you think of something that's been significant for you in keeping you centered?
Thank you for that question. There was an episode that occurred early in my life, and it involved a very, very complicated partnership and integration. We were working with companies that had to work with us but didn't really like us. And we had a meeting, and I'll try to talk about this so it doesn't reveal information. And it was this very uncomfortable meeting where I was pretty young, I was in my 20s, and it was 4 companies together, a lot of yelling, a lot of people pointing to contracts, and then a lot of mistrust. And I finished 2 days of meetings, and I walked out of that place, and I was alone. I was supposed to come with someone else, but I was alone. So there was 4, it was like a UN meeting. There was like 4 tables, it was just me, and then everyone else brought like 3 or 4 people. And so when we had an argument, they'd start playing Zone, and they'd tag on, and it was me, and I'd have to, this was the style of the people we were working with. I don't always do this, but I had to yell at multiple people at the same time. And I walked out of there, and I was, I won't look, I was in Europe and I had a weekend, so I went to Paris for the first time. I was very excited about this. That's part of the story I'll tell you. And then I was just sitting, I bought a ticket to listen to some Latin being sung in Notre Dame. And I was just sitting in front of, it happened to be the Louvre, it's not really important, but for those of you who've been, it's a story. I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, I just feel this, I'd been so strong for so many days by myself. I was like a 25, 26-year-old. And all of a sudden, it just hit me. And I was like, these, and they were all men, these men in the meeting, most of them I did not respect. I didn't want to be like them. I didn't want to do business the way they were doing. It bothered me they were fathers. Like it was that sort of, I was so,
Wow.
and I was sitting there and it was like, this is so hard. I want to quit. But I talked to you about my co-founders and I was like, every part of me wanted to quit right then. Except that I was like, I can't let those other guys down. And I was here by myself, thinking I was going to go on a vacation afterwards, and I just started crying. And I just felt sorry for myself, and I'm like stumbling around. It's Paris, so it's beautiful, but really I was stumbling around. I grabbed and I bought a baguette somewhere and was just eating it while I was like walking around. And then I forgot that I had tickets in my pocket because I'd bought tickets to go to Notre Dame. So I, tearing up, I walk in there, I sit down, and they're singing in Latin. Psalm 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen guard the gate in vain. In vain you toil day and night, without sleep, I think it was, right? And at that point, I just felt at that point that I was like, okay, I needed to be here. I needed to hear this. It is okay. I'm being watched over. And I'm going to keep going.
Wow.
And I needed to hear that night.
Wow.
And I needed to be there. And so that's my memory.
Wow.
That's my
wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ben. And it is a joy for me as your friend to introduce you to many of my friends, to have you here. This is one of the things I appreciate most about what I get to do is to bring people together. And so thank you so much for taking a part of your sabbatical to come and visit us. Thank you so much for everything you shared. And we can give Ben some applause for what he's sharing.